in this country and who is taking the time now to put his wealth of knowledge as far as public service is concerned into a memoir. And this is A Moving Horizon, a book that it will be launched next week, talking about his storied career in the civil service. I wanted to just read a snippet that we have as well, where it says Ambassador Dr. Francis Muthaura is well known in Kenya as a career civil servant and internationally as a diplomat par excellence. In his 5 decades of public service, he achieved the rare feat of serving under the 5 post-colonial regimes of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Daniel Arap Moi, Mwai Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, and William Ruto. He launched his career in the early 1970s as a junior officer in the provincial administration and exited in November 2022 as chairman of the Kenya Revenue Authority Board. His vision has been a dedicated and committed public service to Kenya, the East African region, and the world, for which he won accolades and awards from diverse institutions. A Moving Horizon is the life journey of Ambassador Dr. Muthaura, spanning from his childhood on the slopes of Mount Kenya to his retirement from public service. The book follows the career of Ambassador Dr. Muthaura as he rises through the ranks, taking on diplomatic assignments in European capitals and at the United Nations before assuming a leading role in the re-establishment of East African community. It is about his return to the Kenya Civil Service, where he rose to the office of Head of Civil Service and Secretary to the Cabinet. The reader is then taken through his heart-rending moments when he is indicted for crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court. The journey of Ambassador Dr. Muthaura exemplifies focus, loyalty, resilience, commitment, and patriotism, inspiring both aspiring and current civil servants. A Moving Horizon is where we want just to pick also a bit of information on how the government is being run, and we want to tap into his wealth of experience right now as we buckle down to discuss with our panelists, just to tease out some of his issues as well. Ambassador Dr. Muthaura, thank you so very much, Your Excellency, for joining us this morning and choosing to be here on KTN News just also to talk about your book that will be launched next week. As I mentioned before, yeah, it's an honor for me especially to see you now, the hard copy. We've always been the hard copy, yeah, we've always been seeing the soft copies. Now today, meeting you in person also is a great honor. And going through your book, I think is a rich compendium of knowledge that you've tucked away, that somebody who wants to know how the government is run in this country up to now can actually pick a wealth of knowledge from it as well. But let's just begin from the book itself and the title itself, A Moving Horizon. I know you must have considered why that will be a moving horizon. We can begin from there. Why did you choose a moving horizon?
Thank you very much for the, for the good words you have mentioned about me. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that I was privileged to serve the public service. Mm-hmm. Really is a privilege.
You did.
For those years, almost 50 years. And at home and also abroad. Mm-hmm. So when I talk about the moving horizon, mm-hmm. Is that what I'm saying is that these, our personal aspirations, have no limit. Mm. Just setting targets, mm-hmm. and you'll be surprised sometimes when you surpass those targets and you set other targets. You are moving, mm-hmm. you are open. Then the country itself, when I really became a bit of age to understand what is happening. Kenya became independent when I was in Form 1. Mm-hmm. And that time the population was about 7.5 million or 7 million.
7 million.
And today we are what? Almost 52.
56, 52 there.
Million. Yeah. So you can see the expansion of the country. Mm. At that time, if you know, the budget of the country was a very small. If our ministry, I remember I used to look at those budgets. If our ministry had 20 million shillings, it was like a huge budget for that ministry, those during the colonial days. But today we are talking of trillions, billions for our ministry. So, you know, the horizon, everything is growing. And this growth just doesn't happen. These people make things move. And there's no limit. The sky is the limit. If you compare, especially we did that quite a lot during the time of Vision 2030. You know, the whole vision idea was, where do we want to take the country? We were comparing ourselves with the best performing countries globally. And we had picked countries like Singapore, like South Korea. We had picked countries like Malaysia, Japan, countries which were third world or qualified to first world through effort. We were saying, why? Through the example of these countries, why can't we be there? What is hindering us? So we even brought in experts from those countries to sit in our own economic and social council, so that we borrow ideas and we created that type of ambition. Just before this, there was a discussion about the politics, county politics or national politics. The issue here is in the Vision 2030 and eventually in the Constitution itself, our orientation was to make the national politics issue-centered. Our politics to be issue-centered, not centered on personalities. And to institutionalize our political parties. My friend here talked about, my friends here talked about political parties in the country. We move political parties from concentrating more on personal or sectional or ethnic type of ambitions, so that they focus more on national issues. And we wanted our political parties to be national parties. You know, the structure of our political party need to be national, and it should also be observe all the rules of democracy within the party itself. There should be competition within the party, so that we get the very best people leading the parties, and also having changes rather than people being life or permanent leaders. So that was all about to change orientation of our national politics, and to develop a very strong country based on nationalism and also national cohesion. You know, it's very important, national unity. So when we are talking about moving horizon, what we are saying is that how do we move ourselves, our own country, even our own political parties, to the level which the people of this country would say we are playing at the top level of world nations. Why not? Yes, we can be in the top league of the world nations.
Yeah.
In democracy, in resourcefulness, technology, and what have you.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, and of course, thank you for that. We also want to just hark back to where you began, as you've mentioned, in the 1970s. And of course, my colleagues here, Barak, and Churchill Suba and Kindiki as well, they are free. I think we're in a forum to just discuss and ask questions as well. If you have and you can contribute, just feeling free to chime in. Beginning from 1970s and when we had also the administration of Jomo Kenyatta up to now,
yes.
You can take us through the phases of Epic of Times down through the stream of time up to today. What has been the changes? How has this horizon been moving? Can we say we're getting any better? Singapore has taken off. It is way above us as it is. We were on the same keel, on an even keel, but right now things are diametrically different. But you can just begin from your early childhood and what brought you to civil service. Was it a flash of interest, or it was a happenstance? What happened? I don't want to tease out from the book so that people will, but I want to hear from you.
Yes, I mentioned I went to Form 1 in 1963. That's the time of our independence.
Yes.
So, and we are very educated. When we were in Form 1 at that time,
that was one of the most educated.
Educated, who understand what is happening. We are trying to follow what is happening. So we didn't become nationalists very early, because we are following the national politics, led by our political fathers, Jomo Kenyatta, people like Leonard Gara, people like Masinde Muliro, Oginga Odinga, and we were following really their arguments, and we became really nationalists. The issue of tribalism at that time did not exist. If Tom Mboya came to Meru, he would have been voted to parliament.
That was a real devolution, so to speak.
Yes, people really looked at the Kenyans who were leading Kenyans, and we were all very united. What happened is that, which was very unfortunate, is after independence came, there was, of course, struggle for jobs, and also for land, for national cake. And that's where division started coming. Some people saying, we are not being favored, others are being favored. So that now people started thinking about us and them. So that's what brought actually ethnic politics. And you remember, really, those of you who were there, remember the incidents that took place at that time were very unfortunate, especially when we were in the university. We lost a lot of key political figures through assassinations. People like Tom Mboya, J.M. Karaoke. You remember the Muhindi who was
Pamaginto.
Yes, who was assassinated very early. And these things brought a lot of other confusion in the direction of politics. At that time there was also, you remember there was two major political parties, which was KADU and KANU. Eventually they merged, which was a good thing, and that was actually the trend in the entire continent. They realized political parties were like putting up people apart because of the ethnic competition. So they thought the best way is to have one party, and it was throughout the continent. But then one party also became like a one-party dictatorship. It brought its own problems. The military coup started, you remember, in most of African countries.
Yes.
Even in our own country, there was an attempted military coup in 1982. All these things really deviated our focus on the development, socio-economic transformation of the country. Investment, consistent investment in the socio-economic transformation of the country. So what I want to say, during the first president, his effort was actually to unify the country. Tried a lot to unify the country. But then there were all these other forces that were frustrating that unification. And then the development. Our development record in the first 10 years was quite good in terms of growth. It was good. But in terms of our politics, I think the politics were not really very positive as they should have been. Then when we came to the second president, President Moi, came with a lot of vigor. He had seen the weaknesses of his boss, the president. So he tried now to come with an agenda of unifying the country. And because he was to go through an election after just 3 months, he really toured the country, mobilized the country, and it became very popular because of that agenda of mobilizing the country for development and saying that nobody should be left behind the development. But that effort got frustrated by the attempted coup of
1982. Yes.
When the attempted coup came, well, he got a bit shaky in the sense that he realized you may be working with people near you, but they are not as loyal as you thought. So now the emphasis became, removing people who are not very sure about royalty and bringing in people you can trust. And that again causes other problems. Other problems. And the other thing which, of course, came in was during that time was now the struggle for multi-party reintroduction from one party to multi-party.
Yes.
When now the debate for multi-party came, those who were urging for democratization multi-party now became like the enemies of the government, and they have to be fought. Even before that, there used to be detentions. People are being detained for those type of things. And then the Western countries themselves, after the collapse of communism around 1990, started now focusing on supporting development of multi-party states in Africa, so that these multi-party democracy can replace military dictatorships which have taken roots in Africa, and there was one-party state. So there, that type of pressure also made governance a bit more complex, until eventually the multi-party governance was allowed and the Kibaki regime came in. I think when Kibaki regime came in, it had a national, it was a rainbow coalition. They had a national image, what do you call it?
Outlook.
Yes, it was really under a broad base, political base for governance. And I think for the first time, there was a real focus in development. What I may say is that the development strategy which they came up with, economic recovery and the poverty and the employment creation strategy, became very popular because it was covering critical sectors, and the implementation was spread throughout the country. In fact, the implementation of that strategy was surpassed by the fourth year. In the history of the country, we never had the strategy and development plan implemented and the target surpassed. But this one, they were surpassed. And that's what brought up the ambition of coming up with longer-term vision for the country, growth for the country. That's how we came up with the Vision 2030. And you remember, the growth had gone up to 7%. But then Kibaki himself got a very serious challenge with the post-election violence of 2007, isn't it? And that was a big shock, was unexpected, and it took dynamics which could have split the country, could have destroyed this country. Fortunately, I normally say fortunately, we are under very united public service. I was chairman of the Security and Advisory Committee, which includes the chief of the military, includes the PS of internal security, commissioner of police, and the PS in the office of the vice president, key ministries and the security apparatus of the government, is all communities, broad communities are represented in this group. And we advised the government, we are advising the government on how to deal with the crisis when it came. And one very important thing that we advised is that the government should work in a very united way to ensure that the unity of the country is retained. Whatever happens, we are in a crisis, but we should not take any action which may appear to be widening division about the Kenyan communities. Every action we take must be to ensure that Kenya remains united. And one thing we said at that time during the crisis, no politician, elected leader, should be arrested. They are free to say whatever problems are faced with, but no political leader should be arrested. Because if you arrest political leaders, then you are entrenching the community divisions. So at this particular time during the crisis, let's leave the politicians to express their frustrations or to express what they want done. I think that was a very good advice. The other advice which came about is that, say in the Rift Valley where it was very, 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 very serious, we said, we advised all Kalenjins police should be removed from Rift Valley. All Kikuyus police should be removed from Rift Valley, so that we get other what you call impartial people from other communities to go and peacify the place. And I think eventually these things worked very well. The other point is that we said though people have been thrown out of their land, nobody should be allowed to occupy the land from which people have been thrown out. And the schools which were destroyed and what have you, I think they were like that, the schools which were destroyed. We got the military to rebuild them within 3 months. So, we are in a crisis, but serious strategic decisions were made to make sure that the country remains together. Then after that, you remember, actually, President Kibaki, even before Kofi Annan came, was requesting Raila for a meeting, so that they discuss exactly what the problem is, so that they don't allow the country to get into very serious problems. But Honorable Raila said, well, he prefers that we have an external mediator so that they can facilitate the negotiations, because he doesn't think that right now those in discussions without an external independent mediator will be able to accomplish the type of solution that we need. And of course that's how the matter was. We brought in external mediators, and then the government was negotiated so that it's 50-50 sharing, but the president retained the executive powers, and the prime minister, of course, was head of coordinator of the government public service. So we are in crisis, but compared with the similar crisis in other countries, I normally say our crisis was very well handled. And at the end of it, there was no bitterness. Even the cabinet that came, the Grand Coalition cabinet, actually became one of the most efficient cabinets and the most productive cabinets in the history of Kenya. It was big, but it was very productive.
Thank you. Let's just pause there so that I can also give Barak and Churchill Suba and Professor Kindiki as well. Having just given us that journey up to where we had, this festering wound that still we're trying to heal as a country in 2007 of post-election violence and the Grand Coalition as well. Maybe pick the brains of Barak. Maybe could ask you at that particular, with the Grand Coalition itself, yes, the president maintained executive powers, but we saw also once there was a Grand Coalition, there was also a rift because some of the pacts that they had agreed were not fulfilled or were not taken to the extreme end and conclusion of it. And Right Honorable Raila Odinga felt changed. I know Barak was also working on that particular scene. Maybe you can give us Barak also so that we can, and the civil service also will tell us how are they responding there as well. We have the academia here as well. Barak, let's hear from you. Just from there, what would you say, listening to what Ambassador has said so far?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dubal.
Thank you for being amazingly patient. It's good just we lay the background firmly. First,
you must always recognize that I belong to the academy.
Yes, you're a historian. Yes, I know you're a historian. You belong to the academy.
That's where we start, and perhaps it's where we will also end.
Yes.
But allow me, as a publishing editor, friend of books and lover of books, to congratulate Ambassador Francis Muthaura for the courage to put his thoughts and experience between those two covers and to share with the people of this country. A lot of people who have occupied public space have tended to just keep the whole story to themselves. And I think there's an element of selfishness and even irresponsibility in that, and cowardice, because these people walk through very difficult corridors, and there are very few who can pluck the courage to come and say, this is it. Congratulations again, Ambassador. Having said that, as a student and a teacher of history, political science, and of course public communications, I concur that the coordinates, the historical timelines and beacons are correct, and Ambassador Muthaura has given us very clear demarcations. Of course, I haven't interacted with the book. I'm expecting that I'm going to get home with an autographed copy this morning, and that by the time the book is being launched, that is where we academicians, critics, and appreciators will come on board and speak to it. But I'd like to just place 2 or 3 things in the parking lot for the ambassador to pick up. First, the issue of ethnicity and negative ethnicity, as it has been called in certain places and forums, has bedeviled us, in my view, since slightly before independence. The ambassador thinks that it came after independence. I would say we saw the signals slightly before the coming of independence, when Mzee Kenyatta comes out of detention, 1962. You have got Kanu and Kadu wrestling for him, and we see that Kadu is essentially what we historians call a revanchist kind of a political formation. It is self-preservation kind of movement, in the sense that the political class at that time, from certain communities, if we may speak so, from the coast, among the Maasai, among the Abaluya, among the Kalenjin, are suspecting that they are going to be dominated in the newly independent nation by the Kikuyu and the Luo. I think we have got to come to terms with these historical facts, and therefore they form their own party. And at some point, in fact, in the history of the country, soon during the Lancaster House processes, we have got a political class within Kadu, which is saying that it is going to divide the colony into 2 different blocks, that we are going to have a different country with Ronald Ngala as the president and Masinde Muliro as his vice president. And that declaration is made actually at Lancaster by Daniel Arap Moi, who says he's coming home to essentially lead the country that way. And so wise counsel intervenes, and that does not happen. But we see that those suspicions, the ethnic tensions, began that early. I will want the ambassador, who is essentially my very elder brother, to speak to that. When he was in Form 1 in 1963, I was a very small boy, just preparing to go to Standard 1 the following year. And so if you are looking for the children of Kenya who went to school in 1964, you are seeing one of them. We are the Uhuru children. In fact, all of us should be called Uhuru. And and our country is riddled with that problem throughout. Even when Kadu dissolves itself voluntarily, so we are told, so that we can foment national unity, we do not seem to see it. Sometimes when you are very close to what is happening, you perhaps don't see it very clearly, because the perception from elsewhere is that President Kenyatta, and God rest his soul in eternal peace, goes on to form a hardcore of homeboys, contrary to the perception that he tries to unify the country. There are historical perspectives that would posit that in fact he divides not just the country, but even the Mount Kenya communities themselves. There are those who are feeling completely left out, marginalized. Certainly the Meru, in spite of the fact that there's tokenism through people like Jackson Harvester, Angaine, and others.
He was a harvester. The harvester bit, I didn't know that there was a name called Harvester.
Yes, okay. He was called Harvester. Yeah. And then when you get to what has sometimes been euphemistically referred to as the House of Mombi. As now a mature boy ambassador, in 1974, there was an election, and my constituency was Embakasi. I had not yet gotten of the age to vote. But there was a political rally, you know, Fafa Jericho, and Mwangi Bogo Karungaru was contesting that election. And as children, I must have been in secondary school at that time, we assembled where the rally is. And Karungaru is going on and on about the big house, that they don't want anybody else to get anywhere near power. They want to dominate everything. Hata hii Nairobi wanataka waichukue yote peke yao. And I was wondering, why is he talking about the big house? When I look at him as a Luya boy from Emanyuria in Kakamega, he belongs to the big house. Only to discover, to my shock, that even within what we as outsiders considered that this was the Kikuyu house, it was the big house, there were rifts, that there were even such assertions to the effect that the presidential motorcade should not go beyond the Chania River, meaning that it must stay within Kiambu. Yeah, so even within the Kikuyu and among the Kikuyu, there are Kikuyu and then there are Kikuyu. Yeah? In Mount Kenya, there is Mount Kenya and there is Mount Kenya. And I think that that test of nationalism may not have gone off with flying colors under Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. President Moi comes to power when a mature boy, a heartbeat away from the university. Joined the University of Nairobi the following year. And he says he's going to follow in President Jomo Kenyatta's footsteps. There's every indication, in my view, that he seems to have walked into and in those footsteps, and that seems to have consistently remained the trend in our national story. It is something that maybe a future generation is going to reverse. I don't know. I would really want to hear my colleagues talk about it, and especially His Excellency, the Ambassador. There are many things, but let me just speak to one more for the time being. I like that title about a moving horizon, because when you talk about a vision and a visionary agenda, a vision is a big thing that keeps on moving and going, and the horizon keeps on moving, and you never seem to get to a point where you say, now we have achieved it, now we are happy, let us stay here. Even the people who call themselves developing countries, they have never reached a point where they have said, now we have developed.
We've reached, yes.
Now we have reached, let us just remain here. But I've always, Your Excellency, found Kenya's Vision 2030 to be focused on a rather narrow horizon. Today, 2023, with only 7 years left, we are still talking about Kenya's Vision 2030. Is it possible that we could have a wider and broader?
It's a moving horizon.
It is a moving horizon. If I may just finish the last paragraph.
Yes.
You see, China is quietly talking of China in the year 2150. And the agenda is that they are going to have taken over the world. The agenda is that they are going to have dominated the entire world, not just from Beijing, but being present everywhere And they have already started those satellite activities, invading all these spaces quietly.
We have their newspaper here.
Through something that
China Daily.
that looks like altruism, and through infrastructure, through all manner of projects, through broadcasting, through bringing their language through the Confucius Institute. If people are talking about where they want to be 200 years from now, why are we talking about where we want to be 7 years from now?
All right. Okay. You want to respond to that, or I just give also, you've taken mental note of what
let me respond to that.
Then we'll hear from Professor Kindiki. And
was long. You know, I agree with that. His analysis, his history is good, actually, and because it's true. What he says is true. But then he didn't mention some other things which are very important, should be seen in a broader context. He said mine was a bit narrow, but still, there is still a broader context.
Sorry if I said
you know, we became independent during the days of the Cold War, the East-West competition. Also, during the struggle for independence, our colonial masters were encouraging ethnic conflict to weaken the country. So the new government which came in, and all those things to deal with, to make sure they overcome those pressures, because they were real pressures, because they were sponsoring, they were interfering in a lot of things. And then here we had also a settler community. You remember they supported Majimbo agenda very well, because they wanted to have perhaps a stronghold in Rift Valley where they had a lot of settler farms and what have you. So there were, at that time, there were a lot of pressures which were actually not positive to national unity, or not supportive of the new regime. You remember that the fallout between Kenyatta and Odinga, that fallout definitely was not internally generated. That fallout was externally generated, because Odinga was described as very friendly to the Eastern Bloc, to the Russians, to the Chinese, and what have you. And the West was fighting spread of those ideologies in this country. And Kenyatta, on the other hand, was supposed to be more positive, more aligned with the West at that time. So all these forces at that time were real forces. The other point which I would like to say is that the unfortunate thing that came in when Kanu took over, Kenyatta won. You remember at one point Kanu won, but they slowed on forming the government because they wanted Kenyatta to be released from prison. Because he was still in prison when Kanu won. And when he came, of course, somebody else resigned to give him space. At that time, Kadu formed the government. But the good thing that happened is that when they found that the country cannot go on divided, because the politics were divided between Kadu and Kanu, they decided to form one party. I think after 1 year. Since 64?
64, 65,
yes,
more like it.
They merged.
They may not quite have merged.
Yes.
But Kadu dissolved itself.
But the leaders, people like Masinde Muliro,
came together.
Yes.
Under one party.
Yes.
Because we were by law a multi-party democracy.
Yes.
But in practice, a one-party state, and the law prohibiting or forcing those who defect to go back to the electorate had not come in place. It would come in place after the divisions in Kanu.
Yes.
But proceed.
Yes. So I'm saying there was an effort to bring in, to bring other parties in the Kanu. Of course, when they came in, they occupied. They were not ascended. Still, the strong people were the Kanu leaders who were there before. So what I'm saying is that there were challenges. The ethnically also politicians were pushing for a share of a cake in the government. They were pushing for a share in the government. And that share sometimes was not evenly distributed. If the share is not evenly distributed and people see as though it's not distributed, then they are discontented. I know. I think like the first government, you find there were like Kiambu alone and almost like was it 5 ministers or out of 22? There were 22, I think, ministers. But you find the Kiambu alone
dominated the cabinet.
Dominated, not even Nyeri, and Kibaki was only an assistant minister from Nyeri. So that Kiambu, those numbers really were not received very well by a lot of others. And then what also came in, which was also caused a bit of problems, is that the development budget at that time was more concentrated, and I know they were justifying that the way the government was doing. See, they want to invest first in the most productive areas. So the areas that are not very productive, which did not have infrastructure, were actually neglected for a long time during the first round of government, isn't it?
Yes. With the social paper number 10.
Were neglected. So that's why you find even like, this time we have shifter and so many other things pressure started coming. So some mistakes were done probably because of what one may call insufficient appreciation of what triggers general development of the country. If you don't have sufficient appreciation of that,
right,
you invest, but you're not going anywhere. So that's what caused a bit of problems. People said Central Province was being favored. Other people started complaining a lot at that time. So I'm not trying to contradict him because these are the problems which were continuously being addressed by each government to try now to, to narrow the differences. And that's what causes actually national cohesion. You see, remember during the time of Moi, Nyachai brought in with Moi the district focus for rural development. You remember that was the first effort try to focus on development throughout the country because it's focusing on districts. But at that time the budget was very limited. The impact was very limited. Now, when the new constitution came in, of course, introduced this issue of counties, devolution. And that was the same agenda which is being followed to make sure that the whole country develops
equally.
Yeah. And ODM was very, very, very strong on that because you remember the loss of the first constitution, the first draft, 2005, because that issue on devolution was left pending. The other issue which was pending was the issue of either to have presidential or to have parliamentary
system, which still is a big debate right now. But allow me to just butt in so that now we can allow also Professor Kindiki and Churchill Suba to just chime in as well and give the different views. Then we'll move also to your diplomatic career. and where the foreign policy stands as it is right now compared to your time when you posted as the third secretary to Kinshasa. You can tell us more. Still that particular region, there is instability there. What do you learn from where you started until now? What is not really going on correctly? We've had also our boots on the ground. But let me hear from Kindiki, just listening to him and remembering, the storied career of our diplomats and us.
Thank you very much, Dubar, and the panelists. I consider this debate very useful, and first of all, I want to thank Ambassador Francis Muthaura, who has written a book on a moving horizon. Thank you very much, Ambassador. In academia, we say scholars never die. Ambassador, you never die, because this is something that will be read in generations, even generations to come. We may do so many things in this world, but when they are not documented, people easily forget, and they don't even know whether some issues existed. We are here because of actually what has been documented in the past about Kenya, and I think Ambassador has been able to address quite a number of issues. I've not been privileged to look at the book, but I do believe he has the hands-on experience, and also now he has put it in writing. So thank you once again, Ambassador, for putting it in writing and documenting what he has experienced in his leadership on governance in this country and his contribution. And I think it will go a long way to help other leaders also maybe to emulate what he has done. And having said that, Ibar, and today's debate on issues of governance in this country. I take you a little back, historically, we find that empires emerge and they die. There were Greeks, then they became weak. That didn't, now the Romans took over the British Empire. And what has been happening just before the independence of this country, the British Empire was very, very, very strong at that time. And of course, the Americans were also coming up. And now what people have been experiencing, the American Empire in court, I can say so, because the control of the world, politically, economically, in governance, and all these issues arose. So before independence, Kenya and the leadership in Kenya was being managed by the British. And there was very little Africans could do. So they had one common front of fighting for independence, unity of the country, and then we go to get independence. But the whole issue of governance now came in after independence. And some of us were being born when Ambassador was in high school, which is good. We appreciate that, and we enjoy the wisdom that you have. Now, the whole issue about divisions, ethnicity, conflict, and all these fights about governance, leadership, and management of public affairs in this country is that now Kenya is given independence from the British, who are the colonialists, and now you are told you can govern yourselves. And then now people started now forming the government. The first president of this country, President Jomo Kenyatta. So the way he formed the government, it's what brought issues about, some sections felt they were not included in the government. And that went a long way. And just before I continue, I say that democracy is a process. It's not an event that happens instantly, and then you say, now we are independent, and therefore this is the way to go. It's a process. Even those who are in the management of public affairs and governance and leadership, at that time, headed by the head of state and the president, the first president of the Republic of Kenya, President Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. So there is no written formula where you are told this is what, but they are given general rules of governance. And therefore, when people feel not satisfied, they start even forming other parties. That's why you find there was KANU. Major parties there were many parties before independence, but after independence there was there was KANU and KANU. They were fighting, and then KANU won, and then people felt they were not included in the government and the governance, and therefore they started now looking for ways of representation. So issues about governance and leadership and democracy, which is a process, they surround issues of inclusivity, representation, and of course communities with the bigger population. If you look at profession academically, or if you look at it critically, you analyze. If you are more people, you are likely to be having more representation, whether in the government or whatever circles. So it takes an initiative of a leader to think of the small groups, and they're easily forgotten. And that's what really brought the issues about conflicts and lack of representation. And it's a long way, because it's a process which brought back and forth arguments in various governments. Then after Jomo Kenyatta came the former and late President Moi, and they tried to unite the country, but again, people felt they were not included, they are not represented, their views are not. So, and people talk the slogan of the national cake. To me, national cake means governance, just representation in the government. And how do we share this government? Because it's only one, and it must have one leader, and it must have representation and inclusivity. Issues about gender, name them, there are many. So you find that in this country, that we have suffered the backlash of now how do we share the national cake, the leadership and the government. And that has been the issue that has been affecting our governance and leadership.
Right.
Just before I stop my contribution, just to say that, like now the Chinese empire is so strong that any worthy leader anywhere in the world must be on the lookout, because really they are competing with the American, and the economy is also becoming strong. That's why they are everywhere. So after independence, before, after, and now with the dispensation of the new constitution, the argument is the same. You look at the process of democracy. That's why I'm saying democracy governance is a process. It's not an event that may happen at one particular time, but it starts and then continues with improvement.
Thank you.
When you look at the current leadership of Kenya Kwanza, they're asking for support from those who lost. And instead of just fighting the government, they come together. They may give their critical comments, but we must move on and focus on the national agenda. The national agenda of improving the economy, the welfare of the people of Kenya, because that is very important. It's not just a position that you have in the government or in leadership that matters so much, but what you deliver and whether the people who are being led, who are the voters. In fact, it's very interesting that voters do not have, or the common people do not have those issues. If you look at, although this is not part of the discussion here, but if you look at the people of Nairobi, they were demonstrating because they are saying now, where are we going? Where do you want us to go if you take us away from the street? So you cannot take a decision, you move people from point A, tell them to go to a known point. They will just make noise. But if you move people from a particular point and you direct them and tell them, we move from this room, we take you to the next room, they will accept. So these issues of governance, which must be critically looked into so that the general public may benefit from the leadership and the governance of this country.
Okay, before we take a short break, Churchill Suba, you might want to chime in as well before we...
Yes, definitely. I'm one of those avid readers of Odysseys like the one that the ambassadors penned, and I look forward to reading and of course to attending the launch, if at all it is not yet too late.
He's inviting himself.
Of course, we are assuming we will be there.
Yes, yes.
And we are assuming there are a few copies in the car that we can autograph for us. But having said that, first of all, is the part of the reason I normally read such books is because of the snippets of wisdom and the experiences that are shared.
Yes.
Because in the course of narrating what transpired, certain decisions were made. So you look at the circumstances and the context in which those decisions were made, and you begin to understand our history as a people. So I really look forward to reading this publication that is coming not too late after, you know, the former cabinet minister Beth Mugo also, you know, launched another one that really gave us snippets into. And I want to agree entirely with the ambassador and this account of some of the epochal moments in our history as a country. I was not there in the 60s. I came into being in the 70s and became more politically conscious in the 80s. But I know there are things that struck me even as a child. You know, growing up in Jericho when the founding president died, you know, there was a lot of migration to the rural areas because of uncertainty as to what would happen. And I remember as a child, we would get to know whether we are about to go to the village. You would be deprived of your good-looking clothes. There'll be a lot of washing. But this time, it so happened that none of those ceremonies preceded our going home. We were just told we are going home. And the long prayer that my parents said when we arrived safely, and the country was still intact. You know. So it occurred to me that, you know, something big had happened. And I kept on wondering, who is this, so that if he passes on, because people would die even in the village, I had lost relatives, my own grandfather had died, but we were never taken through these emotions. I said, who is this so powerful? And that informed my engagement in the constitutional reform process, so that we could try to dismantle some of these awesome powers that made the presidency such a powerful office that whenever the holder rested, people had to relocate to the village without notice. It is interesting that, you know, we are talking about this and people shares at a time when there is an ongoing debate in the country about shareholders. And it seems that this debate has continued. Kenya, of course, as a country began as a company. So when the current deputy president talks about, you know, shareholding, he is just the colonial mentality in him, and of course having been an administrator in the provincial administration, you know, comes out very robustly. But, you know, issues of ethnicity, and I hope somewhere between the lines in the ambassador's book, the role of the colonialists in entrenching and in planting the seeds of ethnic division, you know, was real. Even this Kadu thing, even when the Kadu and Kanu went to Lancaster, and the role of a Swiss lawyer. The lawyer is Swiss but hired by the British to secretively, you know, entrench this division and fear among the so-called, you know, smaller tribes that they sought. Yet it was the interest of the British settlers who had interest to remain, and they are still there and they are welcome. They are Kenyans in their own right and so on. Is real, and we see it even in South Africa towards the dying embers of apartheid, when they deliberately, you know, use Magosuthu, may God rest his soul, he rested the other day, to, you know, delay, you know, the dismantling of apartheid and so on. So those things were there, but what for me stands out is the massive failure by, in my view, two presidents so far in this country. First is the founding president, to harness the goodwill. You will rarely see people say, I'm Chaga, but if you walked along Accra Road, that is today renamed Matiba Road, you will hear people say, we Mojaruo, we nini? And it has become, you know, it's as if you do not know somebody's name. You must refer to them as Kikuyu, Kamba, where Mukamba, where this and so on, is so entrenched. And I think the founding president of this country failed to harness, you know, having been aware of, you know, those tensions and pressures that the ambassador has talked about. The second president, who in my view failed to harness another opportune moment to cobble this enterprise called Kenya is one Emilio Mwai Kibaki. That, you know, there was so much goodwill. I remember leading a group of people to repossess KICC, you know, and Kenyans thereafter started, you know, even, you know, arresting police officers whom they spotted taking bribes. And then, you know, Kibaki gradually, you know, caves into those pressures from friends and cronies and fails to see the bigger picture. Those, in my view, I cannot blame the second president. After all, he was only following the footsteps of his forebearers. And you see, I cannot blame, for example, Uhuru Kenyatta, who, you know, came to power under completely different contexts and circumstances. But I see a bit of those isms that pervaded our history during the colonial days in the current government. Because even when His Excellency President William Ruto was constituting his government, somehow he found a group of principal secretaries that he never removed from office. Everybody else came and joined them. And there is only one parameter around them. They share one ethnic identity. And I think that was, in my view, a wrong signal. I think even when the current president appears to differ with this deputy, I wonder, where's the difference? The only difference is that the deputy is a little more blunt, a little more open and outspoken. Yet that is what the president practices.
Thank you.
And so this continuation of, you know, these seeds of division that the colonialists planted, unfortunately still persists, even after some of us who are privileged to be at the Bomas, you know, thought of entrenching some of these values like inclusivity, you know, accountability, transparency. But apparently, you know, Article 10 seems to only make, you know, good reading, but no practice.
Right. Want to take a short break right now. And of course, we are focusing on the memoir of Francis Muthaura, Ambassador Dr. Francis Muthaura, A Moving Horizon. As you can see it here, just trying to pick some of the sentiments inside there that he has written. And the book will be launched next week on the 2nd of November. And we just want to know now, as we take a short break, when we circle back with his diplomatic heart as well, and also a very pivotal cog in Kibaki's administration was the National Economic Council, and how was it discernibly different in terms of trying to move the economic agenda of